Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Dan King from the Institute for Justice sent me an email yesterday. Some of you may have gotten this also if you follow them. There's a town in Pennsylvania that had a law on its books that said if you park a car on the street, you cannot put a for sale sign in its window. Now, of course, you can put your car there. You just can't put the sign in the window that says for sale. Could you put a sign in the window that says something else? Apparently, just not for sale. So there's a problem there with, the First Amendment, maybe? Maybe? Well, victory. Pennsylvania town repeals ban on for sale signs on cars legally parked on the street following a lawsuit. Just the other night, the Nazareth Borough Council voted to repeal its ban on for sale signs on cars that are legally parked on the street. The vote comes less than 5 months after Nazareth resident Will Kramer, represented by the Institute for Justice, filed a federal First Amendment lawsuit challenging the ban. So if you pulled into Nazareth and you got a sign in your window, don't worry about it now. Yesterday's decision to repeal this unconstitutional ordinance is a win for the First Amendment rights of all Nazareth residents, said IJ litigation fellow Bobby Taylor. The government cannot block people from truthfully advertising something they're trying to sell. That's exactly what the old ordinance did. In October 2023, the man was preparing for a move to the Philippines where he's going to teach English to school children. As part of that move, he wanted to sell his 87 Chevy Deluxe truck. After his online ads went nowhere, he put a for sale sign in the window of the truck, which was legally parked on the street in front of his house, like it always was. So the vehicle's always there, and suddenly he puts a sign in the window, and that's against the law. Because of the for sale sign, he was facing a criminal charge and a fine. So in April of this year, he and the IJ sued the borough over the ordinance. I'm glad the borough has done the right thing and repealed the law so nobody else will have to worry about facing criminal charges for simply putting a for sale sign in their car window. This case was always about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else in Nazareth. Under the old law, had his sign been an advertisement for a business or a slogan for a political campaign or any other form of speech, that would have been legal. The only message that was illegal to display on a car was one that said, for sale. And anytime you hear that there's a law governing the content of speech, you can say these things but not these things. You got to look real hard at it because it's going to have problems. So you could put a sign in the window that says, vote for Alfred E. Newman, president. That's fine. That's fine. Oh, and by the way, bumper stickers, knock yourself out. So what if you put a bumper sticker on your car that said for sale? Oh, that's wrong. That's a sign. That's a sign. I saw the sign. You can't do that. It was clear from the beginning that this ordinance criminalized some forms of speech while permitting others, which is a clear violation of the First Amendment, said IJ Senior Attorney Jeff Rose. We're very happy that Nazareth has acknowledged the flaws with this old law and gotten rid of it. And by the way, I've mentioned that before. There's several ways to fight laws. And, you could go to the ballot and try to get a law changed by some kind of amendment or something. But if you file a lawsuit and then the borough itself decides to remove the law, well, you got them to do it, but it may have taken a little more work than you'd like. Nazareth's other parking rules, which do not regulate speech, remain on the books. And see, I've mentioned before, if you can frame the argument yourself, you can often make it go really well. Nazareth's other parking rules, which do not regulate speech, remain on the books. For example, the other part of the ordinance which banned parking on the street for the purpose of greasing or repairing a vehicle will continue to be enforced. And I'm going to tell you right now that I lived in Los Angeles for 2 years, went to law school out there, and I actually saw people doing oil changes in the street. Now, you might say, Steve, if you got to do an oil change in the street, you got to do an oil change. Oh, no, I'm talking about seeing somebody actually spin the filter off and pull the plug out and let the oil get in the street and just run down the curb and eventually probably make its way out to the, ocean. So I can see why that would be illegal. I'm not sure. I'm assuming it was already illegal at the time in California. It's just it wasn't being enforced or was probably more important stuff for them to look at. Repealing this law shows that Nazareth can continue to ensure people are parking in safe ways that preserve public safety without violating the free speech rights of those who are looking to sell their vehicle, says the IJ President and Chief Counsel Scott Bullock. I've met Scott. He's a very nice guy, very smart guy. And he's the one who runs the Institute for Justice now. And I met him at a retreat last fall. And here's the thing. Interestingly, this got me thinking, as some of these stories do. Some. I know, and it's about 5 miles from my house, but I know where there's a place where there's a guy who's got a pretty big yard and a house set way back from the street. And out at the end of his driveway, every time I go by, this is not an exaggeration, every time I go by, he's got something for sale at the end of his driveway. It might be an ATV, it might be a motorcycle, it might be a boat, it might be a car. He often has 2 cars parked out there, or a car and an ATV, with for sale signs in the windows. Interestingly, because they're parked on his own property, he wouldn't run afoul of this law that says you can't park him in the street with a sign in the window. But this guy's front yard looks like a small used car lot. And I suspect he sells more cars in a year than he ought to if he's not licensed. And he probably isn't licensed because in Michigan, to be a licensed B dealer of used cars, you have to have a place of business. And there's all kinds of descriptions of how the business has got to operate and what it looks like. And the end of your driveway on your lawn wouldn't qualify. I'm pretty sure. It's been a couple years since I looked at that. And so if he is a licensed dealer, he's probably curb stoning, which means he's selling the cars at a location other than his dealership. But I don't think he's a licensed dealer. I've just driven by and I've seen what he has there. And the last time I drove by, he had it was an ATV and I believe a car. But it was different than the car that was there the week before I went by. And I remember one time he had something I actually stopped and looked at. He had an army truck. He had an M35A2 deuce and a half, kind of like the one I used to have years ago. And he had this army truck parked there. And I actually stopped and looked because I wanted to see how it compared to the one I used to own. It wasn't the same one, but it was the same type. I got out, walked around it, looked at it. I took some pictures of it. And I was actually thinking, I might want to take a better look at this vehicle. I went by a day later and it was gone. So apparently the guy's got a lot of traffic and business at his location, but he's not in a town. He's actually a few miles south of a small town, but he's on a fairly busy road, so he gets a lot of drive-by traffic. But I've seen vehicles parked with for sale signs in the windows, and I also remember I grew up in Birmingham, Michigan, a suburb of Oakland County, north of Detroit a ways. And I remember that there was a couple different places, very, very well-known places, where if you wanted to sell your car and you're kind of getting sick of waiting, you'd go park it in a particular parking lot near an intersection with a sign in the window. And there were a couple places, including at Maple Road in Coolidge. There was a mall there, a shopping mall, strip mall. And right at the corner of that was a sign for the mall. And then nobody ever parked near this corner on the weekends because the place wasn't that busy. So people would park their cars all along there with for sale signs in the window. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if the owner of that parking lot gave anybody permission to do that. And arguably, they could come by and say, hey, this parking lot is for the use of the patrons of these businesses. And if you simply bring your car and drop it off on Friday night and pick it up, Monday morning or whatever, and put a for sale sign in the window, you're not really a patron of the business, So that might be a violation of some rules as well. But here, what's really the key is that they were focused on the speech, the actual content of the words. And we talked about this before, that if you've got a law regulating billboards, for instance, or a law regulating murals, for instance, the second they say, oh, your mural can be pictures and whatnot, but if you put a word in there, that's a violation. You got to get a permit or pay something or take it down. And, you can put up a billboard, but your billboard can't address the following topics. I mean, obviously, if you put an obscene billboard with, X-rated stuff on it next to a freeway, that might draw the attention of the officials, and you might have a hard time fighting that on First Amendment grounds. You could fight it, but, I'm not sure how far you'd get. But the point is that if I said, you can put a billboard up right here, and if it says, eat at Joe's, that's okay. But if it says vote for Alfred E. Newman, you can't do that. No political speech. What? So the moment they get into the content of the speech, you got a problem. So you could put signs all over your car because that's one of the things someone's going to say. Someone's going to say, Steve, the for sale signs are ugly. They're ugly. It's a blight. It's a nuisance. It's an eyesore. Well, if I'm allowed to take a sign that's bright red and put lettering on it that says something else, that's okay. It just can't say for sale. Now, I know some people are going to say, Steve, what if I put up something else that said, you may purchase this car. It doesn't say for sale. I suspect it probably said something about you cannot advertise the car for sale by putting a sign in the car that contains language suggesting it is, in fact, for sale. And it wouldn't have to be the exact words for sale. Otherwise, you could do the number 4 and then misspell sale, S-A-I-L or something. Of course, somebody's going to go, wait, is that a boat now? So, Dan King of the Institute, thank you for sending this to me. And as I always do, I got to tell you, the Institute for Justice does great work. And I had somebody recently contact me and go, Steve, I contacted them. They wouldn't help me with my case. And I said 2 things. I said, number 1, they're very, very busy, and they're handling more cases than they probably, they're handling as many as they can, okay? But I asked the person, I said, well, was it a constitutional law issue? They said, no. I said, well, they specialize in constitutional law. That's what they do. And so you wouldn't go to a brain surgeon and go, hey, my foot hurts. The brain surgeon goes, well, I don't do feet. Come on, dude, you do brains. You must do feet. No. You want a specialist. So these guys specialize, and gals, specialize in constitutional law issues. And they're good at it because they specialize in it. And they specialize in it so that they can do well in it. And it works that way. So if you have a legal issue, you want to get an attorney who specializes in it to handle it. Okay? So the Institute for Justice succeeds, and they're supported by the generosity of donors. And it's people like you and me supporting them. And it doesn't take a minimum amount of money. If everybody just kicked in a couple bucks, it would help them. And so they are supported, and they get these things done, but they always need more support. So check out their website. It's ij.org, but I'll put the link in the description below the video. And it's important to remember that even if you don't want to support them financially, I urge you to bookmark their page and follow their work, because they're doing such great work, and you will be fascinated that things like this exist. If you put a for sale sign in the window of your legally parked car in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, until recently, you could get in trouble for that. And because of these guys, that's not the case anymore. So they fixed it. Dan King, thanks for sending it. Victory. Pennsylvania town repeals ban on for sale signs on cars legally parked on the street following lawsuit. Sign, everywhere a sign. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. It's like nothing you've ever gone after before.